Alright, you lot. Two industry vets have just launched Gamevestor, brand new crowdfunding platform promising to save mid-tier indie studios from funding apocalypse that's been tearing through the gaming industry. On paper it sounds absolutely brilliant. Players become investors. Studios get money they desperately need. Everybody wins. Except there's one tiny problem. It's all been done afore by a platform called Fig, and that got liquidated. Now, before I go on, let me tell you more about what Gamevestor is. It's founded by two industry veterans, Ivan Merchant and Arthur Van Clap-Kulen. They tried to start their own game studio back in 2023. They had a strong team, solid concept, years of experience working at places like EA, Google, Amazon, Ubisoft and Sega. But when they went looking for funding, they got told the same thing every other indie studio's hearing right now. Mate, if you'd pitched this 2 or 3 years ago, you'd be swimming in cash. But times have changed. So instead of making games, they pivoted and built Gamevestor, crowdfunding platform specifically for games, targeting that brutal 100,000 to €5 million funding range where studios are absolutely dying right now. Model's hybrid approach. You can back a game traditional Kickstarter way and get a copy when it ships. Or you can actually invest €100 or more and get a share at game's revenue if it succeeds. Proper equity crowdfunding, regulated by French Financial Markets Authority. Approved for entire European Union. They just raised €1 million themselves to get thing off ground, and are launching in early February 2026 with 3 carefully curated projects. On top of that, they're implementing milestone-based payouts, so studios don't just get all money up front and vanish. Funds get released in stages, based on hitting development milestone. For project fails, investors might even recover part of their investment. Smart, right? This is a very real problem Gamevestor's trying to solve. Since 2022, venture capital funding for games dropped 69%. Publishers are slashing budgets left and right. Devolver went from spending $3 million per game in 2022 to $2 million in 2024, and they're targeting $1 million for 2026. Mid-tier studios, ones making games that aren't tiny passion projects but also aren't AAA blockbusters, they're in an absolute death spiral right now. Nobody's investing in that 250,000 to €1 million sweet spot. Case in point, Aggro Crab made another Crab's Treasure. Within 4 days, it sold over 100,000 copies despite launching day one into Xbox Game Pass. Critics loved it. Players loved it. Very positive reviews on Steam. And they still can't get funding for the next project. That's how bad it is out there. Publishers and investors have cash, but they become so risk-averse post-COVID that they're just sitting on it, waiting for market conditions to stabilise. So Gamevestor wants to fill that gap, turning players into investors, getting games funded that traditional players won't touch, creating a new funding model for an industry that desperately needs one. Concept sound, need is urgent, regulatory approval is in place. This should work, but I'm not convinced it will, because all of this has been done before. Fig launched in August 2015, shut down in May 2023. Same hybrid model, traditional crowdfunding rewards plus equity investment for people who wanted a share in profits. But here's what made Fig special. Founders weren't just random industry professionals. Justin Bailey, former COO at Double Fine Productions. Advisory board included Tim Schafer, man behind Psychonauts, Grim Fandango and Brutal Legend. Brian Fargo, creator of Wasteland and Fallout. Fergus Urquhart of Obsidian Entertainment. These aren't corporate operators, they're legends. Game creators with decades of proven hits and massive fan bases who'd already proven they could run successful crowdfunding campaigns. Tim Schafer's Broken Age raised $3.3 million on Kickstarter. Brian Fargo's Wasteland 2 pulled in $2.9 million. Fergus Urquhart's Pillars of Eternity raised $4 million. These people had track records, names, and audiences to make equity crowdfunding work. And it did work. For a while. See, Fig's first campaign was Psychonauts 2, which raised $3.8 million. They funded Pillars of Eternity 2, which brought in $4.4 million. Wasteland 3, Outer Worlds, which went on to become a critical darling and commercial success. Phoenix Point. These weren't just funded, they were successful. Fig actually delivered returns to investors. By end of 2017, investors had seen 245% returns. They had 3 straight years of positive returns from 2017 to 2019. Fig proved concept worked. In 2017, Fig raised $7.84 million in Series A funding led by Spark Capital and Greycroft Partners, property venture capital money from serious investors who believed in model. That's nearly 8 times what Gamevestor just raised. And Fig had legendary founders, successful games generating actual investor return, and nearly a decade to figure out economics. In May 2023, Fig got liquidated into its parent company, Republic. 8 years of operation, proven concept, successful games, actual returns, and it still couldn't survive. And do you know what killed it? Compliance costs. Equity crowdfunding in the United States, and it's same in Europe, requires SEC approval. That's tens of thousands of dollars per campaign in legal and accounting fees. You need audited financial statements if you're raising over certain thresholds. You need ongoing investor relations. You need platform maintenance, legal compliance, customer support. Costs scale per campaign, but revenue don't scale same way because you're running a boutique operation. Fig had everything. Legendary founders with proven crowdfunding success, a portfolio of critically acclaimed commercially successful games, actual positive returns that proved investors could make money, nearly $8 million in venture capital funding, and economics still didn't work. Regulatory burden were unsustainable even with all those advantages. So if Fig, with Tim Schafer and Brian Fargo and $7.84 million and proven investor returns couldn't make it work, what makes Gamevestor think they can do it with €1 million, no-name founder, and a weaker launch portfolio? Ivan Merchant and Arthur Van Clap-Keulen are not Tim Schafer and Brian Fargo. I'm not saying they're incompetent. Merchant worked as a commercial manager at EA, Google, and Amazon. Van Clap-Keulen were a programmer at Ubisoft and Sega. These are solid corporate credentials, but they're operators, not creators. Merchant's background is in business development and commercial operations. Van Clap-Keulen's a technical guy, a programmer. Neither of them has a portfolio of beloved games that built a fanbase. Compare that to Fig's advisory board. Tim Schafer's name alone could pull in millions because people trusted him to deliver quality. Add in Brian Fargo and Fergus Urquhart. With those names attached to a project, investors opened the wallets because they knew these people could ship hits. Gamevestor don't have that. They've got corporate experience, which is useful in running a platform like this, but it don't inspire confidence when you're asking people to invest in game development. If I'm putting my money into a game, I want to know people vetting it have a proven track record and knowing what makes a good game. I want to see that they've been in trenches, that they've shipped products, that they understand what it takes to go from concept to commercial success. Now, this interpersonal attack on Merchant or Van Clap-Keulen, I'm sure they're perfectly capable professionals, but in crowdfunding, perception's reality. And perception is that Fig had legends and Gamevestor as corporate middle management. That's going to matter when they're trying to attract both developers and investors. Gamevestor's launching with 3 games in February 2026. These are carefully curated, expert-vetted projects that made it through their selection process out of over 200 applicants, and you're about to see why I'm not optimistic. First up, Black One Blood Brothers by Helios Studio. On surface, it actually looks impressive. It's a tactical military shooter, single-player focused, inspired by old Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon games. Developed in collaboration with former French Special Forces Commando Marine for authenticity. It's got a very positive rating on Steam, 80% positive from 1,225 reviews. That's good for an indie game. But here's the problem. It's been in early access since January 2022. That's 4 years. It's already on Steam. You can buy it right now for $13.99. According to Steam Spy, it has between 50,000 and 100,000 owners. Revenue estimates put it at around 304,000 to 360,000 gross over 4 years. After Steam's 30% cut, developer netted somewhere between 90,000 and 250,000. That's around 30,000 to 83,000 per year. Not bad for a solo developer. Now he's asking Gamevestor investors for 320,000 to 1.8 million for a full 2027 release. Let me repeat that. He made $300,000 over 4 years, and he's asking for 6 to 10 times his current lifetime revenue to finish a game that's already playable. Here's what investors should be asking. If you can't self-fund completion after making $300,000, why would I believe €1.8 million is going to change your trajectory? What are you going to do with that money that you can't do with revenue you've already earned? Of because current concurrent player count is 12. Peak were 131 back in October 2024. For a game with 50,000 to 100,000 owners, that's abysmal retention. Most of those people bought it, played it once or twice, and never came back. From a business standpoint, this reads as one of three scenarios. Either game ain't profitable enough to self-fund completion, which is a red flag to investors, or is trying to secure funding before early release sales dry up completely, which is a bigger red flag, or he genuinely needs money for console ports and marketing, which is most charitable interpretation, but still concerning because if your existing sales can't fund that, why would investors believe more money will help? And let's be honest, 4 years in early access screams cash grab to most gamers. Fair or not, that's perception. Helios Studio is fairly unheard of despite 9 years of Unreal Engine experience. Victor's a solo developer with no track record of shipping commercial success. He's asking investors to trust him with up to €1.8 million based on an early access game that has 12 concurrent players after 4 years on market. That's not an investment. That's charity with equity strings attached. Next, Void Reaver by Banana Blitz. Published by Entalto Publishing. Now, give credit where it's due. Entalto is actually legit. They're based in Zaragoza, Spain, and they've got a real portfolio. They publish SpongeBob Krusty Cook-Off for consoles, which is a Nickelodeon licensed property. That's impressive for a small publisher. They've also got Ink Inside, which launched in December 2024 with Crunchyroll as a partner. Two Strikes, a 2D samurai fighter that narrates Baki DLC. Manta's Kitchen, from Maya Omega for PSVR 2. They're a real publisher with actual shipped games. But here's the problem. Entalto's a publisher. Publishers are supposed to be funding. If Entalto believed Void Reaver were commercially viable, they'd fund it themselves. Instead, they're asking Gamevestor investors to pony up €120,000 to €230,000. Why? If this publisher thinks this game is going to make money, why aren't they putting up their own capital? Concerning possibilities are obvious. Either Entalto don't want to risk their own money, which is a red flag, or they're testing market interest before committing a full publishing deal, which means they're not confident in commercial potential. Or it's a co-funding arrangement where Gamevestor investors take on risk Entalto won't shoulder, which is terrible for investors. On top of that, Void Reaver's a roguelite survivor, and that market is absolutely flooded right now. Vampire Survivors made over $100 million. Now there's literally hundreds of clones. Unless Void Reaver is something genuinely unique, and I couldn't find enough information to determine that, it's fighting for scraps in a completely oversaturated market. As for Banana Blitz themselves, they're apparently a French studio, but they've got no website, just an itch.io page and a Discord server. That's it. No professional web presence, no portfolio to speak of, note that inspires confidence in their ability to deliver a commercially viable product. When your entire online presence consists of an itch.io page and a Discord link, you're not exactly screaming professionalism to potential investors. Compare that to Entalto, who at least has a proper website, a track record, and ship games. Developer behind actual game? Invisible. And that's not reassuring when you're asking people to invest tens or hundreds of thousands of euros. Finally, Immortal and Death That Follows by Mishura Games. This is most interesting because it reveals something deeply concerning about Gamevestor's curation process. Mishura Games is a 14-person team based in Estonia. They're self-publishing a kung fu noir action/RPG based on Buddhist mythology. Sounds cool, right? Except they already ran a Kickstarter campaign, launched September 16, 2025. They set a goal of €25,000 and raised $29,069 from 407 backers. That's 134% funded. Success, right? Except now they're also asking Gamevestor investors for $280,000 to $500,000 on top of that Kickstarter money. They're double dipping on crowdfunding platforms for the same project. Now, Mishura Games has 14 people in the team. Even in Estonia, where salaries are cheaper than Western Europe, you're looking at a minimum of €3,000 per person per month. That's €42,000 per month burn rate. Game's planned for a 2027 release. That's at least 2 years of development. €42,000 times 24 months is just over $1 million in operating costs. And that's being conservative. Don't include software licenses, hardware, office space, legal fees, marketing, or any other costs that come with running a studio. They raised $29,000 on Kickstarter. That covers less than 1 month of operations. Now they're asking Gamevestor for up to €500,000. Even if they hit that stretch goal, That's barely half of what they need to operate for 2 years. Where's rest of money coming from? And then there's red flags in their own press release. Immortal's progress and demo release are a triumph of a personal and professional trauma. Escaping prison at past that included public litigation, studio closures, and more. Public litigation, studio closures, those are not things investors want to hear. They also mention having to restart development in late 2023 because they lost a framework license. That's another setback. More time lost, more money burned. From an investor standpoint, these are massive warning signs. Previous studio closed, legal problem, had to restart development. Need 2 crowdfunding campaigns to get part way to money they actually need, and they still don't have enough even if both campaigns succeed. Questions you should be asking: why do they need 2 crowdfunding campaigns for the same project? Do they not have confidence in product? Is this just about getting a payday for the team? Where's rest of funding coming from? Because €500,000 is not enough to finish this game. Nobody's talking about that gap. This isn't an investment. It's a desperate play from a developer who couldn't get traditional funding and is now trying to cobble together money from multiple sources just to survive long enough to ship something. Now, I wish all 3 games best, genuinely. I hope Black 1 Blood Brothers finds its audience. I hope Void Reaver carves out a niche in roguelike survivor market. I hope Immortal ships and Mishura gets to tell their story. But from a business standpoint, these aren't investment. The charity with equity strings attached. And if you're thinking about pouring your money into Gamevestor, you need to understand that you may not be making a smart financial decision. You're supporting developers who can't get funding anywhere else, and there's usually a good reason for that. Look, mid-tier funding crisis is very real. Studios are genuinely desperate. Talented developers with good ideas can't get funding because publishers and investors have become so risk-averse that they'd rather sit on the money than take a chance. Industry needs a solution to this problem, badly. I just don't have full confidence in Gamevestor being that solution. It's another corpse waiting to happen. Corpse of Fig is lying right there, showing us exactly why. Like, subscribe and all that bollocks. Drop your comments below. If you think I'm being too harsh, or if you've spotted something I've missed, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Gamevestor's got something Fig didn't, but I won't bet on it, and I definitely won't invest in it. I'll see you next time, you magnificent.